Hi, this is Mike with OPST. We're back here in the office today talking about D2 tips. Kind of explain them more. Most people, if you're a steelhead fisherman, are familiar with the Mo tips, 10-foot tips, T8, T11, T14, but no one's ever targeted the trout market. And trout guys have kind of always been forgotten in sink tips. You kind of get a generic tip, you can get a cheap tip, you can get a mono, but you can't get a real sink tip. You can't get ones that are designed to focus on specific environments or obstacles. And with Ed being the principal designer, one of the principal designers behind the Mo tips, we said, why not? Let's try this with the trout market, because I think you guys are being neglected on that end of it, and it's a game changer in steelhead world. It'll be a game changer in the trout world. And what we did is we have T6 identified by your bright green. They also have line IDs, which is really nice. And your T8, you have your teal, blue, same thing, line IDs on each one telling you what they are. What we have is a full 8-foot sink tip. We have 2 foot of floating, 6 foot of sink tip, and then we have what we call the 4x4, which is 4 feet of floating, 4 feet of sink, and that applies in both categories. Why you would have and what you would change. Let's do an example for the 4x4. If you have a log that's submerged underwater, or you have a big rock, and you know there's fish off the end of that, but you don't know how to access. You're like, man, I can't drop an 8-foot or 7.5-foot sink tip in there. I'm gonna drag and hang up on the rock. Versus when you throw the 4 foot of float, 4 foot of sink, you can hover over that rock or hover over that stick and have your fly still over here working as it turns around the rock or the log. Your fly is still working, and it gives you an obstacle that gets your tip over your obstacle without having to throw past your obstacle, which if you had an 8-foot sink tip, you're gonna have to cast past that, and then you're gonna be past that window, those fish tucked into that break. So this will allow you to keep your fly close to the obstacle. As you know, if you're trout fishing, trout like obstacles. They like rocks, they like sticks, they like cover, something they can hide in and ambush stuff or collect stuff as it comes to them. It kind of disturbs the water and tucks around the rock, so a trout will sit right there. These will give you that opportunity. With the 2 foot of float and the 6 foot, if you go into a run that's 5 or 6 feet deep, it's pretty standard, but you don't want to drag. You just want a different angle of attack. And say you ran the 8-footer before through there, that fly may be this far different in the water, and that's the difference between fish that are sitting up here and your fly going down here. So you got a few fish down here, and now you go in with the 6-footer and it hovers above that, and you have a new group of fish looking at in the same hole that didn't see your fly the first time. So those two will overlap and change your angle of attack for sometimes the same hole, or if you're the 8-footer and you just want to fish some deeper water and you're getting into a bucket and you want to just really dredge through there, that's where your 8-footer is going to be. It's going to shine. So there's lots of obstacles, and like I said, with the 4-footer, pull this off the wall here, really cool. So like I said, it's half and half. So you're going to go 4 feet of float, 4 feet of sink. And the idea behind that, like I said, is this will come off either your floating tip if you're a single hand guy, and this will work on a 3-weight on up. And if you want to run a T8, I would say a 5-weight on up single hand, and Trout Spey will handle all of them. And you're going to do Trout Spey up to like 12 feet, and you'll stay in the box. What's nice about the Mo tips that they did is when steelheading, your cast didn't change. You can change tips, but your cast will stay the same. These will do the same thing with Trout Spey. So if you're making spey casts and you're changing a 5-foot tip to a 7-foot tip to a 10-foot tip, every time you got to really change your cast to pull it out of the water, or slow it down or tighten it up so you don't blow anchor. This gives you the same anchor points, the same motion, so it'll make learning to cast and dealing with casting sink tips easier, because you're dialed in on, okay, my box is this size, I'm going to stay in that, I'm going to work within that. I don't have to change every time I change a sink tip. So just making things easier. And you can do this, like I said, with a single hand rod. You can loop this right to your floating line, whether it be a dry fly line or a heavy weight forward nymph line. So you want to go through a hole and you're like, okay, this spot I want to throw a couple streamers. And guys have always carried streamer rods with a dedicated sink tip, but they only use it here and there in different spots, and then the rest of the day it sits around. Well, if you're hiking in, that sucks, because you got to carry 2 rods through the woods or down a trail or 2 miles. Instead, you throw this in, all you do is change your leader. Take your indicator off if you're nymphing, take that leader off, loop this on with a streamer, swing through the hole, cast and strip, work that hole. You're done with that. Take your tip back off, put your float tip, your leader back on with your indicator, and you're back to nymphing. It's that simple. And these cast super clean with right on a, like I said, even a dry fly line, they cast super clean. And it's a nice option. You know, lots of guys are hiking into remote spots trying to get the stuff, and they don't want to carry 2 rods, and it's not practical. So this will give you an option to throw streamers effectively without changing to a second rod. So your leader is going to be the same. It's kind of a preference thing, but it's typically 3 to 5 feet. Lean more 3 to 4 feet. The recommendation I would do is if you're going to build your own, and guys have shown you before where they'll take like 15 or 20 pound butt and make a loop to loop off the end of that. That'll save your wear and tear on your loop here, being that it's thicker. If you take 8 pound here and you're pulling on it, it's just it'll grind in there and cut on it. This will handle it, but it'll cut your actual tip part of it. So if you want to do just straight leader, add just a little bit of butt section. Don't have to be very big, and then run your 8 pound or your 10 pound off of that. Or you can buy tapered leaders. They make 5 footers, they make 6 footers, 7.5, but just cut them down. Cut them off the back though. Don't ever cut them off the front. That's where your tippet is. That's where your angle is. But you can cut a 5 foot leader down to 4 feet by cutting a foot of the butt out, or a 6 footer and cut 2 feet of the butt out and still have a tapered leader. That's a preference thing. Some guys don't like the tapered leaders. I do like tapered leaders. I just feel that by having that little bit of stiff butt in there, that just helps kick your fly over at the end. It's preference though. A lot of guys are like, it makes no difference. Just put 10 pound on and go with it, or put 8 pound on and go. There's no wrong or right answer to that, but just stay short with your leader. Stay 3 or 4 feet. And what that does is if you go longer on your sing tip sinks like this, and your long leader is gonna go, and your fly is gonna be way up here. So the longer the leader, the higher your fly goes. So it takes more to pull it down, takes more time. If you keep it short, this pulls it down. And by that pulling it down, it keeps in that zone you're targeting much better. So stay short with sing tips. Opposite with when indicator fishing or anything that, you're doing 7.5 or 9 footers, because you're using the nymphs or the weight to sink the fly. This, you're using your sing tip to sink the fly, and you don't want to waste your sing tip by having a long leader.